It's the end of summer 2018, which has been the hottest summer of my life, certainly. In Britain, it's largely been a pleasantly hot summer. In other places, we've seen extreme weather events that are continuing. We're kind of obviously, undeniably, really now in the midst of a climate crisis that is just getting going in the world and is going to get worse. But what I've been trying to think about more, is the idea that the climate crisis is really a spiritual crisis. I want to read you something from Gus Speth, who said, "I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that." I'm really kind of convinced by that actually what is needed is that spiritual and cultural transformation. And what does that look like? What can spiritual traditions contribute to that transformation? I've been thinking about what that spiritual crisis actually is, and the best way I can think of articulating it, I think, is that that it's really about how we view our relationship with the world. That the problem is we can view our relationship with the world as one of mastery, we think we have to be in charge, have power over, have mastery over the universe, over our lives, over ourselves as a society, and that is really what has caused the climate crisis. I mean, it can be a useful instinct because as humans, wanting to have mastery over things allows us to use tools and create the society we're in. But in some ultimate way, we're still pursuing this way of mastery over all relationships, over kind of ultimate sense of relationship. And the problem is that it's kind of ultimately impossible to have full mastery over the universe. And it's also incredibly destructive ultimately. And so the spiritual crisis is an attitude of mastery, that we must have power over all things. And it's that causes the climate crisis. And we don't solve that problem by more of thinking in the same kind of way. We solve the problem by shifting that spiritual crisis, shifting to a new spiritual consciousness that sees our relationship with the universe as not being about mastery, but being about a mutual relationship of love. I mean, imagine if you approached interpersonal relationships with an attitude of mastery, that I must be in charge, I must have power over in this relationship, and that's how the relationship is going to be successful. I mean, some people do have that attitude, of course, but it's destructive. But actually, good relationship is a relationship that recognizes a level of vulnerability and intimacy and not being in charge. And that which makes a good intimate relationship, I think, is what makes a good relationship with the universe, with all that is. And so I think the spiritual shift that we need is a shift that takes us from seeing the purpose of existence as individuals and a society as having power over, of being in charge of my life, my destiny, all of that stuff, into saying I am entering into relationship and vulnerability and powerlessness with all that is, with those in my life, with the earth, with God. Because I think from my spiritual perspective, the divine is a relationship of intimate love, not power over. I mean, some people view things in that way. Some people view the relationship of God as being one who has power over. But that's, for me, a bad theology, to view the divine as something that has power over us, over everything. Rather, in fact, the divine lover is intimate and vulnerable and connected with all that is. And the spiritual shift I think we need is for our attitude of, for us to move into a relationship of intimate connection, almost erotic connection with all that is. Shifting from wanting to have power over, mastery over the universe as ourselves, and by extension as society, to wanting to be in intimate, connected, mutual, vulnerable love relationship with all that is. And I think, as I've been thinking about these things, that is the shift that is really needed.